Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Recipe for Revenge by Hazel Smith, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Merciful God, please let my Lululemon rain jacket come soon. I don't know how much longer I can stand this. April May pressed her hands together in prayer, hiding beneath her hood as she power walked down Laurel Lake's main street. At the moment, she was inheriting her grandmother's old musty yellow coat, which was 2 sizes too big, had a hole in the pocket, and smelled like mothballs. She'd ordered a hideously practical yellow replacement from an online supplier yesterday, but apparently it could take 10 to 14 days to deliver to a quaint town nestled in the vast Minnesotan woods. Spending $300 on practical outdoor clothing rather than the latest trends made her shudder. Having it not turn up so she was forced to continue wearing her late grandmother's outerwear was another matter entirely. I could just go to Tim's. She eyed trusty Tim's Outfitters across Main Street, spotting a blue tent in the window, and immediately decided it was a bad idea. Her $25 rubber boots were proof of that. No, she would wear top of the range or nothing at all. Despite the dreary overcast day and her tragic garish raincoat, April skipped into Laurel Lake Vet Clinic in high spirits. It had been an uplifting morning over at the Herald, the office of the town newspaper, where she had recently published her very first report, all about the recent town poisonings and her missing family heirloom. There must have been something in the air because the solemn basset hound lying across 3 waiting room seats perked up as the door closed behind April. It wagged its tail as it got up on stubby legs to sniff her. "Hello," April greeted, sending a smile over to the owner. She vaguely recognized the friendly middle-aged woman with the blonde ponytail, just as she did everyone in town, but she hadn't yet learned their names. In fact, she was actively trying not to because she was still convinced she wouldn't be staying here permanently. But she wasn't thinking about that. For now, she was trying to enjoy her time, taking it day by day. Easier said than done when living by a lake/swamp required wearing rubber boots everywhere. But she was doing her best, despite the steady decline in her once immaculate fashion sense. The basset snuffled into April's jeans, and she laughed. "Can you smell my boxer, Ralph? He's probably tearing up some carpet at home right now." "No, not home, April," she chided herself. "I'm just here to spruce things up and then sell, then back to the city because, well, what else will I do? Even Ralph is temporary. That dog didn't wind up near death in the backyard by accident." Sure, the lake house was looking good with her new renovations in place. She had her dog, her friends, and her side hustle at the newspaper, a job she'd always dreamed of. And maybe sometimes the rolling Minnesotan landscape was less icky and more beautiful as long as it wasn't raining or blowing a gale. Okay, not helping. Either way, she'd have to return to the city once she finished up here. She could only live on savings and inheritance money for so long, and she loved Chicago. She missed being able to wear loafers and classy high heels. She missed busy sidewalks and pencil skirts. She truly, deeply missed Bloomingdale's. The consultation room door swung open, and she lifted her head, glad for the distraction. And what a handsome distraction it was. Wesley's smile was boyish and a little surprised as he stepped into the waiting room, clad in scrubs and a white coat. His brown hair was a tad bedraggled from the workday. A light layer of stubble smattered his jaw. He slipped a pen into his breast pocket, his glance sliding between April and his next patient apologetically. "April," he greeted in that musical, upbeat voice. "You forgot our plunge date." She gave him a playful grin to show she wasn't upset before grabbing a wildlife magazine from the side table and sitting beside the basset. It demanded her attention immediately, and she stroked between its long, heavy ears. "I didn't forget." Wesley scratched his cleft chin hesitantly, proof that he did forget. Though there were only so many animals in such a small town, he was also the only local vet, which meant April often found him flustered and frantic during the workday. She wasn't sure how he managed to stay on his feet for so long, especially when he often planned outdoorsy dates for them in the evening. Thankfully, the nights were getting darker and colder, so April hoped for candlelit dinners and cozy indoor plans soon. Besides, she'd like the chance to strip all the distractions away and get to know him. So far, she liked what she'd learned. "You forgot, and that's okay. Go take care of..." She checked the basset's name tag. "Dinah." "Oh, we won't be long." Dinah's owner reassured. Come to think of it, April had seen her in Cup of Joe's a few times, though they'd never spoken before. Old Dinah here just needs a couple of shots, then she'll be good to go. Dinah whined at that and tried to stay put as her owner stood. I'm Sarah, by the way, Tim's wife. I read your article in the Herald and thought it was fantastic. You did a really good thing for our little town. Good thing you came when you did. Thank you so much. April's cheeks warmed as she shook Sarah's outstretched hand, noticing the silver wedding band that matched Tim's. A few people had come up and to introduce themselves since April had helped find the people responsible for her grandmother's death and a string of break-ins and poisonings. As a stark contrast to a few weeks ago when she'd been treated as one of the suspects and most people had acted wary around her. Stark, but not unwelcome. She was learning that Laurel Lake wasn't all gossip and judgment, although all that came naturally in such a small community. Minus the grocery store owner, Isaac, who hated April's guts simply for being related to the woman who had broken his heart many years ago, her grandmother, though locals seemed nice and enjoyed having April around. I won't keep you anyway. Seems the two of you have plans. Sarah wiggled her neatly plucked brows and dragged an unwilling Dinah past Wesley and into the consultation room. April laughed and opened her magazine. Don't worry, I can wait. Wesley seemed to hesitate, shadows crossing his features as he locked eyes with April. She frowned. Something wrong? Whatever it was quickly dissipated into his usual friendly expression. I won't be long, promise. With that, he closed the door, leaving April to read about foxes and the best places to kayak. Neither of which I plan to encounter during my stay here, thank goodness. As Dinah left the clinic looking subdued by her confrontation with needles, Wesley walked in again, letting out a breath as he pulled off his white coat and replaced it with a brown tweed one. April lingered on the details of the fabric for a moment. It wasn't designer, but it was pretty darn stylish. She might have to ask where he got it. He still bore that strange expression, and her gut churned with a faint hint of dread. Wesley wore his heart on his sleeve, which meant he was too easy to read. Usually that was a good thing, but she wasn't so sure right now. So, shall we head to Joe's? I could die for some coffee and a scone. She hopped up, grabbing her purse and trying to shake her mind of suspicion. Only Wesley didn't let her. April? His hands ghosted along her arm gently, his warm brown eyes darkening to the color of the murky lake at nightfall. There's something I need to talk to you about first. Is he dumping me? Can he even dump me when we're not officially together? April wanted to squirm, but unlike Wesley, she was good at feigning composure. She pressed her lips into a thin smile. Okay, should we walk and talk? If she was going to get bad news, she needed the fresh air to keep her calm. Sure. They stepped outside together. The weather was crisp, but it had muggy, the gray clouds lingering like unwanted guests in the sky. It had been like this for days, still like the earth was just waiting for the right time to explode. Nancy had mentioned the storm warning in the Herald office this morning. With Wesley tense beside her, it felt like it might strike any minute. So, what's going on? Her voice was quieter than usual. Wesley must have noticed because he stepped closer as they walked, his warmth brushing her side as though he was trying to reassure her. That was a good sign, right? Or was he just the sort of guy who would let her down gently and say, hey, I hope we can still be friends, and hug her right after? Probably. He was unbearably nice. She'd imagined this situation so many times, but she thought that if nothing else, getting out of the city would mean curing her perpetual dating problems. The men she usually attracted were awful business types, content to play games. So it had been long since she'd succumbed to anyone, and only now because Wesley seemed perfect in every way. Maybe she'd been wrong about him. Well, I got a call yesterday. He took a deep breath, bowing his head. It wasn't the direction April had assumed this conversation would go, and she frowned as she tucked a strand of her caramel-tinted hair behind her ear. Oh? It was a guy called Matthew who saw your ad in the Herald about Ralph. He's from Dewstone, the next town over. Oh, no. April's chest squeezed. This was even worse than it's not you, it's me conversation. After weeks of having no luck searching for Ralph's true owner, they'd both been convinced that her beloved boxer would never be claimed. She'd been imagining life with Ralph for weeks now, daydreaming of them walking around the Windy City, setting up his doggy bed in just the right corner of her downtown apartment, and meeting her mom. Those visions now wavered like ripples in a river, threatening to wash away completely. He sent proof that he owned Ralph, well, Buddy, actually, before you found him. It felt like a punch to April's gut, and she couldn't hide or flinch as she crossed her arms around herself. Buddy, the pet name I gave him. Ugh, it even fits him better than his namesake, Ralph Lauren. Wesley put his hand on April's shoulder. He looked as devastated as she felt, and she understood. I'm so sorry, April. I hoped this day wouldn't come. April's chin wobbled, but she swallowed her tears. None of this is permanent. That was always the deal. She'd walked into Laurel Lake already wanting to leave. She'd brought Ralph home while wanting him to be claimed. She was a city girl, a cat person, and she should never have tried to play it differently. But the town had changed her, and so did Ralph. She wasn't sure who she would be when she was alone in that lake house. How did Ralph end up here then? Somebody left his backyard gate open, and Ralph wandered into the woods. This was months ago, so he must have been alone for a while. She didn't like thinking about how long he must have been roaming before she found him. He'd been so sick and thin enough that she could see all his bones. Part of her wanted to argue how careless this Matthew must have been to leave the gate open, but her rational side knew how easy it was to lose a dog, especially one who wanted to chase squirrels and cause mayhem. Still, she didn't have to like it. When is he coming to pick him up? Tomorrow at noon. We thought it would be good to give you 2 time before. Wesley's throat bobbed as though he couldn't bear to get the words out. Though she couldn't help it, an unexpected anger ignited in her. It only burned with a faint sting, but it was still there. Wesley had convinced her to take Ralph home. Logically, she knew it wasn't his fault, but she could only think of that day in the clinic when she tried to walk away and he'd persuaded her otherwise. If that hadn't happened, she wouldn't feel so sad now. Okay, thank you. She tried to keep her tone neutral, burying her chin into her cashmere scarf and continuing on to Main Street. I'm so sorry, Wesley said again, striding to catch up with her. Put his arm around her, but she swiftly stepped away. She didn't want his comfort. She was afraid that she might fall apart if he squeezed her too hard. It was always going to happen, right? Besides, it's probably for the best. I have to return to Chicago once this old lake house is sold. I may not have my old job to go back to, but I have my apartment getting dusty. I don't know if Ralph, Buddy, oh, whatever, would have liked city life much. He'd have no squirrels to chase for one. A line burrowed between Wesley's brows and she looked away. It seemed he was expecting a different reaction, but that wasn't who she was. Even when she'd found anonymous threats at the lake house upon her arrival, she focused on the solution at its root, literally, since she spent the evening digging up poisonous plants. As there was no solution to this or a way of uprooting the threat, she had to push away her sadness and look at the positives. Ralph was going to his real home with his real owner, to be called Buddy again. There was one less thing tethering April to this place. She should be glad. Then why did she feel like crying? April, it's okay if you're upset about this. I'm just glad Ralph has a family to go home to, really. She pasted on a fake smile. Wesley tried again. But I know, she lifted her hand, focusing on the scene across the road. What's going on there? Officer Greenlee, or Kate as she preferred to be called, especially now that they were on cordial terms, was jotting something down in her small notepad while Tim ranted and raved outside his store. She couldn't make out what he was talking about, but a few words stuck out. Thieves and delinquents, losing money, think people can just walk in and take whatever. My livelihood! A crowd of intrigued locals flocked around them, including a few crochet club members and a couple of Joe's regulars. April, I really think we should talk some more about... We can later. I gotta go. April narrowed her eyes, that familiar thrill of anticipation jumping through her. She wondered if there was anything else to write about in this town. It was a far cry from her former fashion column in Chicago, but it was better than nothing. After her last freelance piece did so well, Nancy requested something new for the Herald, but April didn't know where to start. What was there to report on in such an unassuming place? garden contests, 4-H club meetings, and corn crops? April shuddered. Perhaps now she had her answer.